Well, I couldn't find the front bumper bolts out there. I know they're this size, and yeah, that matches. Most of these bolts are from Volkswagens, so I'm going to pour the bigger containers out because all I need to do is find 6 that'll thread it and hold it, so it really won't take much. Okay, yeah, I was able to find 6 in my parts bin, and those should be enough to hold this bumper rebar on. So we have something a little better than that 2x4 to deal with the front end of the car while we work on the floor. So we'll get that. I want to do that battery tray as practice, so well, we can still reach the battery tray. It doesn't matter if that's in the way. No, we'll decide what to do about it. Either way, we'll get this thing bolted in so that it can. I want to have the hoist holding on here so that while I'm crawling around doing stuff, we can lift it higher. And then those jack stands, if they're not really, they're fine because they're jack stands, but I've got some, that one's not. Man, we'll move them a little bit, make them better before I crawl around the car too much. But if I get moving around in there, it's a lot of momentum. And then these bolts, the larger size ones, this one has a ground thing on it, which is nice. And then these two, I think, are the ones that I snapped, right? Just off of a different car. I think that these went through the subframe of something that I took apart and scrapped at some point. And I hang on to these just because they're nice to have around and not have to buy. Okay, pulled the rear bumper off, pulled the skin off of it. This one still had the clips, so there's a little doohickey that goes in between these to kind of keep them apart, which is why you don't want to just tear on it because you bust everything to pieces trying to take them apart. Otherwise, always pull the bumper off first. But we got somebody had wanted it off or did take it off in the past as they snapped a bolt there. This side only had one attaching it, and the other side had 2, this way and this way. So we'll have to track down more bolts because I think I'm fresh out of bumper size bolt, and I do want all of them in place if I'm going to use this to lift the car up, including fixing that little guy. I chased out the threads on the other bolt, and this broken one, my extractor set, the first size I used pulled the threads off, as it should, but it's not long enough to do any good. And the next size down doesn't fit over it. So rather than grind it down or try to drill through it, I'd like to weld a bolt to the end of it and see if I can get the thing to come out. But the welder's way under there. It's under the stairs, and there's all this crap in the way. So we'll do a little shuffle and get it out and see if we can pull this bolt and save the threads. Yeah, it's ugly and it's not lined up straight, but it's not the point. What you end up with is you're not taking away material, you're adding material, so it's less likely to fall apart like if you just chucked a pair of vice grips on it. So now I have a nice 17mm end to grab her with, and on top of that, putting that weld in there is going to push a bunch of heat through the piece and help break some of that up as well. If I really wanted to go the extra, yeah, you know what I'm going to. I'm going to get the nap gas and heat from this side and try to get the threads outside of it hot as well. So hopefully that's enough heat to help it along. So get back in frame of you. There we go. Oh yeah, look at that, like butter. Easy peasy. I don't know what that's going to be. I'll just a hole in my glove. Look at that. So we'll chase those threads as well. Once it cools down, the bumper should be okay. Obviously it needs a lot of work, paint, get the rust out of it, but as far as being able to hold the car up from the back, it'll be beneficial. So jacked her up in the rear, got the engine hoist picking it up in the front by the bumper, and we have the safety tires in place, so if it does pop down, the worst thing it does is break some ribs. Yeah, so we're gonna get underneath, kind of see what's going on rust wise. Got my safety glasses for the grinder if we start doing little wire wheels. I mean there's gonna be a lot of work under here, but if we can get to a point where we only have to do it once, right? So rail looks really good in this back section. surface stuff. This is really beat up in this little area. Along the seams, we'll have to get these skirts off. A little spot there. All of this looks great. And here's a little, like stuff like that, right? It looks okay. Once we grind into it, it's probably going to be way worse than it looks, especially like back here. The temptation to take everything off is high, but that's just a lot of work, and it might not be necessary. Maybe we can just find some of these pinholes and remedy them. So this is a first one. Just, had a small, similar to one of these, where you could tell there's something going on underneath. So got in and used the wire wheel to get the rest of the way, and you can see it's actually one of the spot welds for the seat cross member. And while it cleaned up nicely, I'm really not sure with this rubbery factory undercoating how the urethane's going to deal with sticking to it. Like if I have this rough rubbery edge and I paint, is it going to be fine, or is this soft enough that it's just going to let that urethane peel right off? So it's a concern. So you don't want to do all this work and then have it just all come apart in a year. So we've only been under here maybe 10 minutes, and it's a pain in the butt. I mean, laying on your back, I'm old, man, I can't do this. But we got, all I've done is a couple small spots, and it's like the arms start to hurt. There's a lot to look at. It's discouraging. So like we're gonna have to figure out a way to make this easier. There's gonna be plenty of work to do underneath. There's got to be something. Okay, so I've been doing some thinking about building a rotisserie for this. I think I can do it under $300 with either 4x6s or 6x6s. So we got the vehicle itself, to make it clear when it's up sideways, would be 61x50 or 19 inches. Basically from the bottom of the windshield to the roof, which is a really light area. The idea here is that top 19 inches is so light that the center of gravity is most likely halfway up the bottom 31 inches of the vehicle, which happens to be almost exactly the center line of the bumpers. So we can use the bumpers as a rotation point, and then build on each end something to this magnitude, where that 36 inches up means if I spin it all the way around, nothing should touch the ground. And we'd need boards 16 feet long if we wanted to attach the ends to each other for stability, and I feel like that's too long. My original thought was like down here, where we attach the ends and then kind of triangulate them to keep them kind of square to each other. But if we do more boards on each end and then just kind of brace them a little bit, that might work. So we'll think about it, but I think that either way, like this setup, while it's functional, it would be a lot better if I was in my early 20s. It's going to be worth it to get this thing 90 degrees so that when our camera's upright, it looks like that, and we can just stand up and we'll have shoulder height access to everything that's important. All right, picked up some lumber. We're gonna go ahead and just make a tilt rig. I'm not gonna do a whole rotisserie. That would have been a lot of fun, but to make the base stable enough for me to be comfortable jumping around all over it, it would have had feet that stuck out too far. I'd like to be able to keep it in the garage, and I think with a tilt rig that's possible. So a really good video guy made for, I think it was a Camaro body, and it's pretty long. I'll link it in the description if people want to see his build. But I'm going to take the same general idea. I'm just going to beef it up a little bit because I'd like to leave the doors on. I'd like to deal with the rear suspension while it's sideways in the air rather than crawling underneath it, things like that. So the goal here will be to leave the front of the car up on the hoist, get it to the height that it needs to be at, and build the front. Once we see how thick it's going to be before we actually attach it, we'll square the car up to the garage door, move it forward, kind of get it in a position where it's not going to hit anything overhead when the garage door is shut, to rotate it. And ideally I think the way to do it is have this center from our drawing before, where we calculated if we're going to use this as our our pivot point, we want to have this at the same height when it's in this orientation and when it's in this orientation. So when you go to flip this thing up, now it's not going to transition smoothly and perfectly stay level unless we do a radius that's equal. It has this as the center point. We don't want to do that because then it's always waiting to just tip right back over. So I think he did a 2-foot radius, and him and another person were able to tilt it. So we might do 2.5. We'll sketch it up first. But even at 2.5 feet, instead of say 36, this would need to be centered all the time. You're looking at a 6-inch lift, so you'd end up with, when it goes from horizontal to vertical, this CG, as you roll it, is going to move and go up and then back down. So it'll be the equivalent of having a ton of leverage off to the side when you pick it up and only moving the center point up and down a small amount. So I think it'll work out well. I'm going to sandwich 2x6s with 3/4 inch plywood. So this thing's going to be plenty strong. I've got bolts to drill and bolt everything together. Yeah, it's not gonna fall apart, that's for sure. I think it's gonna be really stable. Okay, so we'll have to set this down, move those chains so I can access the whole front of the bumper, but these holes fit a 1/2-inch bolt perfectly, which is what I bought. And that's where we're gonna bolt the whole thing straight to the front as one big piece. So I think the first thing is get the first 2x6 cut. This is the sketch I just made, kind of worked my way down the page until I ended up with a design that I like. So this crossbar that bolts to the bumper, there's gonna be stuff sandwiched against that as well through the bolt holes to make things strong. So we'll build this first, get the holes cut kind of for reference, and then we can start piecing it together. We'll cut these rollers and then just start assembling it on the ground, and then we'll be able to pick the whole thing up and just bolt it on once it's complete. And actually I'll want to cut all 4 of these at once so the radiuses are all the same. We'll have 2 on each side. And then the nice thing about this is, I haven't checked the rear bumper, but if it looks like it doesn't really have the same bolt holes, so we might give that a little drill jobby. And if we drill the holes in the same spot, then this rig will be reversible. So either this way or left, right. So we should be able to flip it, do whatever we need. Or we could roll the car in either direction if we wanted to. Okay, one-handed party tricks, because still can't find my chest cam mount. I taped a marker to the side of the tape, and see that slot right there? You can stick that in the head of a screw, which I put 24 inches in from each side. So now, if I line this up, it just has to be close enough. We don't need to be perfect for this project. Then lock the tape down. Now I got a pivot point, and I can draw circles. Whee! Oh shit. It's not perfect. If you had a piece of string, it'd be nice. But at the same time, you can hold the camera, you could keep tension on it. There we go, back in place. And it's not even anywhere close where it started. But close enough, right? So we're looking for roughly a 2-foot radius. And that'll do. We'll follow that, and then we just use this, trace it on the other ones, and make sure that whichever side is up stays in the same orientation when we install it, and we'll have the same profile when we go to rock the car. It's getting there. I got the 4 curves made and cut out, and then 2 nice extra pieces. The intention with these is that I want to put a shelf in above everything here that starts over the doorway and comes across. I've been doing math on timber strength to only have 1 post in the center, and it's like I have to use like 2x12s or something ridiculous like that to do that kind of a span. But at a minimum, I've got the sheeting for it. So next, we need to start making the frame pieces that will screw and bolt to these to make a little wood sandwich. To figure out what order I want to do those in, because at some point, we're going to have a beam that comes down. There we go. The beam that comes across one way for the bumper. We'll have the supports for when it's sitting flat, and then essentially it'll look like this when it's with the front of the car, and then you'll tip, and then this will be the bottom, right, that's on the floor. So we'll have a piece here, we'll have the piece coming out, and that's what'll keep the car from rocking when it sits on it. And then we'll have a brace going across, and there's no point in this extra wood on top of that brace. So we need to figure out, based off of the one scrap piece that I'll have, how big this triangular piece will be, and we can cut off any of this extra and use that material for gussets. Okay, so here's the basic structure of it, with right about maybe here, about here's the center of the car, and then it'll up this way. So what we need to do is do some bracing here as we feel necessary, and we'll get we'll triangulate this guy on the end with some gussets, and we got 2 more boards to do that stuff with, and then this piece of scrap I figure can go in here somewhere, so we'll make that a nice triangle, and then we'll cut off that. So actually a lot less of that plywood for gussets than I thought. So we might be, well, we got that piece is going to come off. We got these 4 that we can use for gussets, and then worst case we take and steal a little bit from there. And I've got some scraps laying around too that might work. So just at the beginning of this already, it's going to be overbuilt, and the 2x6s and double sheeting of 3/4 inch is plenty to hold this car up and move it around. The part that sucks is that the one thing I forgot was to buy some M10 bolts for the rear bumper. So I'm going to have to dig around the trailer and find the originals for the front, and then I can just use those on the rear because they're all basically the same. Okay, so I got the bolt holes drilled and checked, and they're correct. And actually, the curve of that thing is not too bad. I think as long as we don't torque on it like an 8, it's going to be fine, because this section sandwiched with that plywood is going to be so rigid that it just won't matter. And the bolts fit really tight in all the locations, so I'm not too worried about it flexing anything. I got the car kind of squared up because I'm hoping this thing will be able to sit in one spot and just tip up with the garage door. Well, I might be able to do it with it open, even looking at the height now, because this is higher than it's going to be when the boards are on. I just got it up there to move it. So the next step is to assemble one of these, come in here and get it in the position it'll be when the car's tipped, and then roll it back and see how it lines up with the bumper, and determine. I'd like to be able to walk through here and pull stuff in and out when it's upright. I don't want to have to tip it down every time I need to use stuff, but we might have to make sacrifices. We'll see. Okay, so here's the basic sandwich part. So we'll get another piece on top, screw it all together from both sides with some 3-inch screws, so the tips will poke through a little bit and cut us all the time, hopefully. And we'll add this leg with a 2x4 just to brace it is all we should need. And then we'll do a couple lag bolts through it, get it on the bumper and set it down, and just see if we're confident in how it feels. Okay, here's one assembled. There's no way this isn't going to work, so I'm just going to go ahead and build the rear one. Well, this one's here, and I can make sure it's an exact copy. The only thing I've left to do is trim off that little bit of our bicycle spoke sticking out. Yeah, so we'll make up the rear one, we'll fit the front, get it set down, measured so that this thing will fit in the garage, we won't have to move it anymore. And then I'll go look for bolts in the shed for the rear bumper. Okay, front and rear are complete, and just for funsies, math-wise, if you look at if this is just a 2x6, right? People use them to stud houses. They use 2x4s to stud houses. A 2x6 stud in compression, so forces this way, by itself can support almost 7,000 pounds. I mean, depending on the type of wood, but the point is each one of these can support more than double the car's weight by itself if it was perfectly balanced. Now, this isn't perfectly balanced. There's outside forces. There might be sheer kind of like twistings and moments and things like that, but the important parts are that when it's this way, you know, we have a hard stop and a hard stop. We're not using the gussets for our actual strength. They're just keeping things from wiggling around. And same thing once the car tips up, is we have one solid piece going all the way to this point here to support the vehicle. The rest of it is just to keep it stable. So these are really looking great. They feel good. They're nice and thin, so I think we'll be able to fit everything in the garage. So we'll get this front one bolted up and just see how it feels. Then we'll like I said before, we'll hunt down bumper bolts and get the rear positioned and in place. So we're running out of room. This is what it'll look like when the car's down, and that top post should be almost level, about level with the roof. We'll double check when it's on. So I have it lined up so that all I have to do is move that pole out of the way, and it should roll without jamming into stuff. The issue you run into is that now, well, when I tip this up, right, when we roll it to where it'll be when it's flat, whoop, boing, 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 rough estimate, about there. So here's that bolt hole, which is that bolt hole, which means the side of the car is going to be way over here. So we need to, I think, clear things out. Well, obviously we need to clear things out, but we at least need to move the cabinet and some other stuff just so that this thing's mobile, and then it'll just be a little game of Tetris to move the cabinet around whenever I need to tilt the car. I think it's going to spend a lot of time on its side, and then when I'm done at the bottom, we put it flat and take everything back apart. I don't think it's going to be up and down a lot, but we'll find out. Okay, so it's connected. It feels super sturdy. One of the issues I'm going to run into, and you can already see it, is how it rocks. Without anything flat in there, it wants to pivot. So I'm either going to need to hammer some shims in. Well, I probably should hammer some shims in, but really what's going to need to happen is get the rear one on and get it set. So we need to lift the rear of the car up as much as we can with the jack before we set this one down, so it doesn't try to unfold itself. And then at some point we should probably use the top of the post and maybe that bottom side and try to brace it left to right. It's a long span to brace, but really what we need is a beam that goes across so it's level, and then triangulate it so that it can't wiggle. That way the frame itself is stable and the car is just sitting inside it instead of the car being part of the structure. I mean, inherently the car is part of the structure, but we want to take away it being the only part of the structure. So another thing to note, though, that I just thought of is that the reason it's kind of like that now is because there's only one axis, right? So this plane is what's supporting it, and it can flexi. And then once it goes and tips, now all of a sudden we're good this way. So the part that supports and then that's perpendicular to holding the car up has two bolts, so it's not gonna flex like this. It'll be flexy like this, but we don't need any support in that direction. Okay, so I mean, I've done dumber things in my life. So that pivot, horrible fucking idea. I was trapped here holding this because it started to slide because one of these wheels is off in the driveway. Things weren't balanced perfect. So I'm still confident that once it's up and level, it'll be nice and stable, especially when it's tipped up. But I feel like I really need to get some kind of bracing going on the front of this before I try to manhandle it. Because it really and started to kind of peel, just ripping on the bolts. You know, they didn't really, you know, they still look good, right? They're still okay. The bumper part got a little stressed. You can see a bulge in there. That wouldn't have happened if they hadn't torqued so much. Yeah, it's just one of those that keep your toes out from underneath stuff, because you could really get hurt if you try to do the dumb kind of stuff that I do. So yeah, I'll try to figure out a way to brace this front. It's almost impossible to brace it without it being level though. So we got to figure something out. We got to get this rear end up, get the car level, get the backside on, and then we'll be good to go. Probably should have had the whole thing close. I don't know. I just don't know. It's gonna happen though. Okay, so here's idea number one. I moved my chalk and let the thing rock backwards just enough so that it kind of looks like we're perpendicular here, and then I'm gonna figure out a way to run support from this tow hook down to the bottom to keep this thing from weeble wobbling around while we pick the other side up. And the hope is that once we get it tipped up, we can remove those. Well, we won't need to remove them. We'll take maybe one off just to get the stuff and work on it, and it'll keep things stable for us. I'll kind of triangulate this a bit and keep it from trying to murder me in the garage. Okay, it's fun and exciting. You got these giant screws. I forget what they came out of. They were somewhere in the house, and I didn't know why they were necessary. They're just gigantors. You use them on this top part, 2 in one way and 1 in diagonally. A giant bolt up here. Hey, there's not a whole lot of other options. Now, that being said, I think that this board, bolted the way it is stronger than my arms, right? So it's gonna it should keep this stable enough to lift this other side, and we'll see how things go. I mean, I think the worst of it's over. I don't think it's gonna ratchet up again on us, but we'll find out soon enough. Actually, here, I'll record it. So just that one, like that brace, 100 times better. It feels super stable. It's not flexing around. I can push it out with my hand and it doesn't move. The big issue is back here. I had to chalk this. Like for some reason, this thing just wants to pivot. It just wants to pivot out. Total piece of crap, man. Well, it's not. It's a nice lift. There's probably something going on I just don't know about. Maybe it's the slope of the garage. Maybe it's just the way I'm lifting it. I'm probably denting the shit out of this bodywork, but at this point I don't care because that'll be something we have to fix and paint at some point anyway. So I think before that lets go and sends this whole thing flying, we need to get the back part on and set down. Okay, so I think not too bad. This isn't perfectly perpendicular now that it's in the air, but we got slack in the hoist. Right, so that's not holding. It's completely held up by the supports, and I can really like pull on this thing, and it doesn't move much. And I think that's going to continue to be the case once we tip it up. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this lift out of the way and see what happens when we start pushing that block out. See if this is something that I can actually rotate on my own. Another thing to keep in mind is I don't know how much gas is in this, so I'm gonna have to get the pump out and drain this before I tip it. Otherwise, this place could really stink. Yeah, I put my safety wheels in place because even though it feels stable, I always want a backup so you don't get crushed to death. And then decided to just drop the tank out rather than trying to drain it. It's going to be easier. Now with this wheels off, close that door, and there's nothing stopping us from trying to tip it up. So I'll sweep this section of floor off. We'll move this piece of pipe, although the car shuffled so far over during this whole ordeal that I don't think it's going to be in the way. Okay, so I went over to the other side and just lifted right under the sill of the car at the B pillar, and it felt natural. It was going. It wasn't hard to do. There's not a lot of room over there to run if it rolls back towards me and all the wood explodes, but that's not going to be the case. So we'll just have it here. If I die, everything goes to my wife. Don't believe a word that my friends say. My brother can have all my motorcycles. this is a balance point, and I don't know if I can stop. I mean, it's gonna stop because there's that wood there, but I think I'm gonna try to wiggle my way around to the other side. I don't know what the smart decision is here, but I think that's it. I think I want to be lowering it down slowly instead of having to pull me. So just keep it balanced. Just pretend you're doing wheeze. Sure as shit hope that I measured right. So I think if this starts to get too heavy, it's just gonna go like, oh. Let's just go ahead and store parts. Seatbelt. Okay, with two people, that'll be super easy. Doing it by yourself is kind of dumb. But now it's on the ground. I think stop it. Got some. Yeah, I'm lucky a seatbelt didn't fly into one of those windows. So let's get around to the other side. Oh, look how easy this is going to be. That was worth it. That was worth all the pain and agony. And like, look at these brake lines. Like, you know, I'm not sad that I cut through those, but oh, this was such a good idea. As dumb as it was, because this is the bit of grinding I did the other day, and it was just awful. And now it's right here. It's perfect. Like my nipples will fit right in.